The city of Fairhaven had always been bustling, its streets alive with the sounds of honking cars, distant sirens, and the chatter of a million souls going about their day. But tonight was different. It started subtly, an emergency alert on the news about riots downtown. Then came the reports of unusual behavior among the wounded. By the time the first responders realized they weren't dealing with ordinary injuries, it was already too late. The infected didn't just die, they got back up. And they were hungry. Officer Daniel Carter had spent most of his shift patrolling the west side when the call came in. All units, proceed with caution, violent unrest reported near Oak Ridge Mall. Repeat, approach with extreme caution. Daniel's partner, Officer Marcus Lee, glanced at him. That's not normal dispatch talk. Daniel nodded, gripping the wheel. No, it's not. They arrived at the mall to find absolute carnage. Cars were abandoned in the street, doors wide open, their occupants nowhere in sight. The front of the mall was littered with bodies, some torn apart, others still twitching. A woman in a tattered coat staggered forward, her face drenched in blood. "Ma'am, stay where you are," Daniel shouted, stepping out of the car. She lunged at him. He barely had time to react before Marcus tackled her to the ground. But something was wrong. The woman didn't groan in pain or try to push Marcus away. She snarled, snapping her teeth inches from his face. "Get off me!" Marcus struggled, shoving her away. Then the other bodies started moving. One by one, they twitched, then jerked, then stood. Some had exposed ribs, others had broken limbs that dangled uselessly at their sides. But all of them had the same lifeless, milky white eyes. "Jesus Christ," Daniel whispered. Then they charged. Marcus barely made it back into the squad car before Daniel floored it in reverse, tires screeching. "What the hell was that?" Marcus panted, pressing a hand against his bruised shoulder. Daniel didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was racing. That wasn't normal. That wasn't possible. His radio crackled. "Officer Carter, do you copy? We need all available units near Main Street, situation's getting out of hand." He picked up the radio. "Dispatch, we've got a serious problem at the mall." "People are," he hesitated. How did he even describe this? "They're attacking us. They won't go down." There was silence. Then, a shaken voice responded. "We know." The line cut. Daniel and Marcus exchanged a glance. Whatever this was, the people in charge already knew. As they sped through the city, the situation was worse than they had imagined. Cars crashed into lamp posts, fires erupted in the distance, and civilians ran screaming through the streets, some chased by people with ragged flesh hanging from their bones. Daniel veered down a side road and slammed on the brakes. A group of survivors was trapped between two wrecked buses, desperately fighting off an advancing horde. "Damn it," Daniel muttered. "We can't leave them." Marcus checked his ammo. "Then let's make it count." The two officers jumped out, guns raised. "Get down!" Daniel shouted. The survivors ducked as the first gunshots rang out. Heads exploded. Blood splattered. But for every one they took down, two more lurched forward. A man in a torn leather jacket sprinted toward them. "We need to get out of here." Daniel grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the squad car. "Everyone in. Now." The rest of the survivors scrambled into the vehicle, squeezing into the back seat and trunk. One of them, a teenage girl with wide, terrified eyes, clutched a backpack like it was her lifeline. Daniel stomped the gas pedal, plowing through the undead. Their bodies thudded against the hood, some rolling over the windshield, leaving bloody smears. As they sped toward the police station, Marcus exhaled. That was too close. Daniel glanced at the survivors in the rearview mirror. This city's gone to hell. The man in the leather jacket, whose name tag read Ryan, nodded. And it's only getting worse. The radio crackled again. This time, the message was barely a whisper. "If anyone's out there, the city's lost." Get to the station, before it's too late. Daniel clenched the wheel. They weren't just fighting for their survival anymore. They were racing against time. The police station loomed ahead, its once imposing structure now just another relic in a city spiraling into chaos. The neon lights flickered, their glow barely cutting through the darkness. The street in front of the station was littered with abandoned vehicles, some with their doors left open, others stained with blood. Daniel swerved past a crashed ambulance and slammed the brakes in front of the entrance. Everyone out! Move! The survivors didn't need to be told twice. Ryan was the first to jump out, grabbing the teenage girl's wrist to help her along. The others scrambled behind him, pushing toward the heavy metal doors of the station. Marcus ran ahead, banging on the entrance. Open up! We've got survivors out here. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the doors creaked open just enough for a face to appear, Sergeant Rebecca Vaughn. She was a tough woman in her late 40s, her graying hair tied back, a shotgun slung over her shoulder. Her sharp eyes scanned the group before she pulled the door open wider. Get in. Now. Daniel ushered the last of the survivors inside before slamming the doors shut and locking them. The station's interior was dimly lit, running on backup generators. Desks had been pushed against windows, filing cabinets overturned to create makeshift barricades. A few other officers were present, 4 in total. Sergeant Vaughn took one look at Daniel and Marcus and let out a sigh. You idiots shouldn't have been out there. Daniel exhaled. We were responding to a call before all hell broke loose. You're lucky you made it back. She turned to the survivors. Who are they? Ryan spoke up first. I'm Ryan. That's Claire. He gestured toward the teenage girl. The others, we met while running for our lives. Claire clutched her backpack tighter, her knuckles white. She hadn't spoken a word since they picked her up. Vaughn nodded, then turned to an officer named Ortiz. Check them for bites. A wave of unease passed through the group. I swear, none of us are bitten, Ryan said quickly. We check everyone, Vaughn replied. No exceptions. One by one, the survivors lifted their sleeves, pulled down their collars, and proved they were clean. Vaughn gave a sharp nod. All right. You can stay. Marcus looked around. What's the situation here? Bad, Vaughn admitted. Radio's dead. Power's running on fumes. And we're running out of food. Daniel clenched his jaw. How long can we hold out? Vaughn hesitated. A few days. Maybe less. The weight of her words settled over the room. The station was secure, for now. But it wouldn't last. A loud bang echoed from outside. Everyone froze. Then another bang. And another. The dead had arrived. Shadows moved behind the frosted glass windows. Hands slammed against the barricades, fingers clawing against the walls. Low, guttural moans filled the air. Claire let out a whimper, hugging her backpack. Vaughn cursed. They must have followed you. Daniel moved toward the window, peering through a small gap between the desks. The street was swarming with them, dozens, maybe more. Their lifeless eyes stared hungrily at the building, drawn to the scent of the living. Ryan clenched his fists. They're not getting in, right? Vaughn exhaled sharply. They'll keep coming. Piling up. We need a plan. Marcus nodded. We can reinforce the station, lock it down tight. Buy ourselves some time. Daniel glanced at the survivors. And then what? We can't stay here forever. First, we make sure they don't get in. Vaughn turned to the group. That means more barricades, sealing off any weak points, and rationing supplies. The survivors nodded, each of them eager to do something, anything, to keep from thinking about what waited outside. The next hour was spent fortifying. Tables, chairs, and filing cabinets were pushed against every door. Wood planks were nailed over broken windows. The officers and survivors worked side by side, sweat dripping down their faces as they fought to turn the station into a fortress. Marcus and Ryan dragged a vending machine in front of the main doors, blocking them even further. Ortiz and Claire stacked sandbags from an old supply closet against the back exit. Vaughn and Daniel double-checked the armory, distributing extra weapons and ammunition. But no matter how hard they worked, the sounds outside never stopped. The banging grew louder. The moans turned into agonized wails. The weight of bodies pressed against the station. Daniel clenched his fists. They're not giving up. Vaughn nodded grimly. They never do. A deep, metallic groan echoed through the station as the front barricade shifted slightly. The vending machine trembled. Ryan stepped back. You said they wouldn't get in. Vaughn didn't answer. She was already reaching for her shotgun. Then, from somewhere deeper inside the station, came a new sound. A soft click. A door unlocking. A slow creak. Daniel's blood ran cold. The dead weren't the only threat inside the station. Someone had just let something in. The slow creak of the door echoed through the dimly lit station like a death knell. Daniel's heart pounded as he swung his gun toward the sound. Who the hell just opened a door? Vaughn barked, gripping her shotgun. The others looked around, their faces a mix of confusion and fear. The station had been locked down, every entrance barricaded, every exit secured. No one had left their posts. So how had a door just opened? Then came the low, raspy moan. A shadow moved from the hallway leading to the holding cells. Shit, Marcus whispered, taking a step back. A figure staggered into the dim light, Officer Alan Briggs. Or at least, what was left of him. His uniform was soaked in blood, his left arm dangling uselessly, a deep bite mark sinking into his shoulder. His eyes were pale, unfocused. And he was hungry. Claire let out a choked sob. Briggs? Vaughn's voice was barely above a whisper. Briggs snapped his head toward her, lips pulling back into a grotesque snarl. Then he lunged. Boom! Vaughn's shotgun roared, sending Briggs crashing into the wall, a gaping hole where his chest had been. Silence fell over the station, save for Claire's muffled sobs. Daniel exhaled, his grip tightening on his gun. Someone let him out. Ryan looked around, anger flashing in his eyes. Who? Who the hell would do that? Vaughn turned to the rest of the group, her gaze sharp. Start talking. Now. No one spoke. Then Claire took a shaky step forward. I heard something, she said, voice trembling. Before Briggs came out. A door unlocking. Footsteps. Daniel scanned the group, his stomach twisting. Someone in here had opened that cell. Someone had put all of them in danger. Ortiz, his face pale, stepped forward. Briggs, he must have been infected before this all started. We locked him up earlier, thinking he was just injured. And now he's dead, Vaughn snapped. And the dead don't stay down unless you put them down hard. Ryan crossed his arms. Okay, so we know what happened to him. But we still don't know who let him out. Silence. Then Marcus pointed toward the back door. The lock, he said. Everyone turned. The door leading to the rear exit, the one they had barricaded earlier, was ajar. The dead were still outside, pounding against the walls, but if that door had been opened just minutes earlier, someone had tried to escape. Vaughn stormed over, shotgun raised. She kicked the door open wider, revealing a set of bloody footprints leading back inside. Someone had left. And someone had come back. Daniel turned to the group. All right. Whoever it was, fess up now, because if that door wasn't shut properly. A loud crash from outside made everyone freeze. The barricade at the front of the station groaned under pressure. The vending machine blocking the door shifted. Then, a guttural snarl came from behind them. Daniel turned just in time to see a second figure lurching toward them from the hallway. A woman, her throat torn open, her eyes clouded with death. Another infected. Another one that had been inside. Ryan reacted first, raising a crowbar and swinging hard. The woman's skull caved in with a sickening crunch, and she crumpled to the floor. Ortiz backed up, shaking his head. This isn't possible. We checked everyone. Marcus swallowed hard. No. We checked for bites. The realization hit like a brick. Bites weren't the only way to turn. Someone in this room had been infected all along. Vaughn's face darkened. Everybody back up. Now. The survivors exchanged uneasy glances, but no one moved. Daniel gritted his teeth. We don't have time for this. If someone in here is infected, we need to know now, before they turn. Another loud bang rattled the barricade. The undead outside were getting closer. Ryan glanced at the others. Whoever it is, if you're feeling sick, if you've got a fever, anything, just say it. Silence. Then, a strangled cough. Claire took a step back, her face drained of color. Her hand clutched the strap of her backpack like it was the only thing keeping her standing. Everyone turned to her. Ryan's voice was barely above a whisper. Claire? She hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached up and pulled down the collar of her hoodie. The room went still. A deep, jagged scratch ran down the side of her neck. It wasn't a bite. But it didn't have to be. Daniel felt his stomach drop. When? Claire's eyes filled with tears. At the mall, she whispered. One of them grabbed me. I thought I was okay. Marcus took a slow step forward. Claire, She flinched back. No. The barricade crashed again. The vending machine tipped slightly, exposing a crack of darkness beyond the front doors. They were out of time. Vaughn raised her shotgun, her jaw tight. We can't risk it. You know that. Claire clutched her backpack tighter, her entire body trembling. Ryan stepped in front of her. Wait. She's still alive. She's not turning yet. Daniel hesitated. She could have hours. Maybe more. Or maybe minutes, Vaughn said coldly. The barricade let out another deep groan. The undead were breaking in. Vaughn's finger hovered over the trigger. We make a decision. Now. Claire's wide, tear-filled eyes darted between them, her breaths coming in short gasps. Daniel clenched his jaw. Whatever they decided, whoever they chose to protect, there was no coming back from it. The barricade buckled with a deafening groan. The vending machine teetered, its weight shifting under the relentless force of the horde outside. Daniel clenched his fists. We don't have time for this. We need to move, now. Claire's breath hitched as Vaughn took a slow step forward, shotgun raised. She's infected, Vaughn said, her voice cold. You know what has to be done. Ryan stood firm in front of Claire, his eyes blazing with defiance. She's still human. She's not one of them. She will be, Vaughn snapped. Maybe in an hour, maybe in 10 minutes. Are you willing to risk all our lives for a girl who's already dead? Claire's lip trembled. I don't want to die. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. There has to be another way. Another crash from the barricade sent a file cabinet toppling over. The gap in the doorway widened, rotting fingers pushed through, clawing at the air. Daniel's mind raced. They were out of time. Then a voice cut through the chaos, Ortiz. We lock her up. Everyone turned. Ortiz's face was pale but steady. The holding cells, he said. We put her in there. If she turns, we deal with it. But if she doesn't, she gets a chance. A heavy silence hung in the air. Then Vaughn lowered her shotgun. Fine, she muttered. But the second she shows any signs of turning. I get it, Ryan said quickly. He turned to Claire, his expression softening. Come on. We'll keep you safe. Claire nodded, her hands shaking. As Ryan led her away, Daniel turned back to the real problem, the Horde. They're getting through, Marcus warned, pointing to the front doors. The vending machine lurched again, nearly tipping over. A dozen decayed hands shoved through the widening crack. The scent of death flooded the station. "We need to fall back," Daniel said. "Upstairs. If we can't hold this place, we need to survive." Vaughn didn't argue. "Everyone, move." Marcus grabbed a rifle from the nearby desk and fired a few rounds into the opening. 2 zombies collapsed, but more surged forward, their moans intensifying. Ortiz and Vaughn backed toward the stairwell, weapons raised. Daniel fired one last shot before turning and running. As they bolted up the stairs, the barricade finally gave way with a thunderous crash. The dead poured in. Second floor, the last stand. The group burst into the upper hallway, their breath ragged. The second floor was mostly offices, with a few break rooms and storage closets. "We need to block the stairwell," Marcus panted. Vaughn yanked open a door. "Here. We can use the desks." Daniel and Ortiz shoved 2 desks across the stairwell entrance, piling them high with chairs and cabinets. Below, the sound of the undead grew louder. The first few zombies slammed against the blockade, their grotesque faces pressing against the gaps. "This won't hold them for long," Ortiz muttered. Daniel scanned the area. "We need a way out." Ryan suddenly reappeared, breathless. "Claire's locked up. But we have a problem." Vaughn turned. "What now?" "The fire escape," Ryan said. "It's our way out, but the alley is swarming with them." Marcus cursed under his breath. "Figures." A loud crack came from the stairwell barricade, wood splintering under the pressure. "We don't have a choice," Vaughn said. "We take our chances outside." Daniel nodded. "We get to the fire escape, then we run." Ortiz hesitated. "And Claire?" Silence. Then Ryan spoke. "We come back for her." Vaughn scoffed. "If there's anything left to come back to." Daniel ignored the comment. "Move." The fire escape. The group sprinted down the hallway to the window leading to the fire escape. Vaughn grabbed a chair and smashed the glass. Cold air rushed in. Below, dozens of zombies lurched in the alley, their lifeless eyes snapping toward the noise. Marcus grimaced. "That's a hell of a drop." "It's not the fall I'm worried about," Ortiz muttered. Vaughn climbed onto the ledge and stepped onto the creaking metal fire escape. No time to second-guess. "Go!" One by one, the survivors followed, their boots clanging against the metal steps. Behind them, the stairwell barricade collapsed. The undead poured onto the second floor. Ryan was the last to climb out. He barely got onto the fire escape when the first zombie lunged from the hallway. He kicked out, sending the creature tumbling out the window. It hit the alley below with a sickening crunch, but the others didn't even flinch. "Keep moving!" Daniel shouted. They climbed down the fire escape, reaching the last platform above the alley. Vaughn glanced below. "We jump and run." "No stopping." Daniel nodded. "On 3. 1, 2. Before he could say 3, the fire escape groaned. Then it collapsed. The platform snapped, sending them plummeting into the alley. Daniel hit the pavement hard, the impact knocking the air from his lungs. He barely had time to recover before he heard the hungry snarls. The dead were coming. Vaughn fired her shotgun, dropping the first few that reached them. Ryan scrambled to his feet, dragging Ortiz up. "We need to move," Marcus shouted. Daniel grabbed his gun and turned. A gap between the buildings led toward the street, an opening. "There," he yelled. "Go!" The group sprinted, shoving past the grasping hands of the dead. Daniel didn't look back. There was no time for that. No time for mercy. Only survival. Daniel's boots pounded against the cracked pavement as he sprinted through the alley. The others were right behind him, their breathing ragged, their weapons clutched tight. The undead swarmed behind them, pouring from the police station like a flood of rot and decay. Faster. Vaughn barked, her shotgun blasting a hole through the forehead of a pursuing zombie. Daniel barely had time to process before Marcus grabbed his arm. "There's a fence up ahead." Daniel's stomach sank. The alley opened into a dead end. The fence loomed ahead, tall, rusted, topped with barbed wire. Behind it, the open street stretched into darkness. The escape was right there. But they were trapped. Ryan cursed. "We can climb it." "Move!" Vaughn snapped, already running toward the chain-link fence. The first of the dead slammed into the alley walls, their bloated bodies wedging into the narrow space. Dozens more clawed their way forward, their moans growing into a deafening wail. Daniel shoved Ortiz forward. "Go! Get over it!" Ortiz jumped, gripping the chain link with shaking hands. Marcus followed, climbing fast. Vaughn turned and fired, dropping another infected as it lunged at Ryan. "Hurry the hell up!" Ryan scrambled up next, his boots slipping against the rusted metal. The horde was closing in. Daniel turned to Vaughn. "You next." She didn't argue. Vaughn grabbed onto the fence and climbed fast. Daniel lifted his gun, his arms shaking as he fired into the advancing mass. A bullet ripped through a rotting skull, but it barely slowed them down. The stench of death filled his lungs. The growls were deafening now. Ryan hit the ground on the other side of the fence. "Daniel, come on." Daniel turned and jumped. His fingers barely gripped the metal before his boots found traction. He scrambled up, ignoring the way the fence swayed under their combined weight. The first zombie reached him. A decayed hand grabbed his ankle. Daniel kicked hard, feeling the bones snap beneath his boot. The creature toppled, dragging others down with it. Then, he was at the top. He swung his leg over, ignoring the barbed wire slicing into his jeans. Vaughn was already on the ground, shotgun raised. Daniel dropped, just as the horde slammed into the fence. The entire chain-link structure rattled, but it held. For now. The streets are worse. They barely had a moment to breathe before the moans started again. Ryan spun. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me." The street ahead was no better. The city was infested. Hundreds of undead filled the ruined streets, shambling between abandoned cars, clawing at the remains of a world that had already ended. Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead. "Where the hell do we go now?" Daniel scanned their surroundings, his pulse still hammering in his chest. They needed shelter. Fast. Then he saw it. A department store across the street, its metal security gate halfway down. "If we can make it there, we might be able to barricade ourselves inside," Daniel said. Ortiz exhaled. "That's a big might." "It's better than standing out here waiting to die," Vaughn said. "Let's go." They moved fast, ducking between rusted cars and abandoned storefronts. Every step felt like they were walking a razor's edge. One wrong move, one sound too loud, and the dead would be on them. Halfway across the street, a body lurched from behind a burned-out SUV. Marcus barely had time to react before the zombie grabbed him. Shit! The thing snapped its jaws, inches from Marcus's face. Ortiz lunged, slamming the creature with the butt of his rifle. The zombie hit the pavement, but more were already turning toward the noise. "Run!" Vaughn shouted. They bolted. The moans behind them multiplied, an avalanche of death rolling toward them. Daniel reached the department store first, grabbing the security gate. He pulled hard, it didn't budge. It stuck. Marcus shoved past him. "Cover me." Daniel and Vaughn spun, raising their weapons as the first zombies rounded the corner. Marcus gritted his teeth and grabbed the gate with both hands. He yanked. Metal screeched. The gap widened, just enough. "In. Now!" Marcus shouted. Ryan and Ortiz dove through first. Vaughn followed. Daniel shoved Marcus inside before turning to fire one last round into the nearest zombie's skull. Then he dived in, kicking the gate closed behind him. The lock snapped into place, just as the Horde slammed into the outside. They had made it. But barely. Darkness and silence. Inside, the department store was dark, the only light coming from the shattered skylights above. The place was in ruins, racks overturned, mannequins broken, supplies looted. Vaughn lowered her shotgun. Check the place. Make sure we're alone. Ryan nodded and moved toward the back, flashlight in hand. Ortiz followed. Marcus leaned against a counter, catching his breath. We're gonna die out here. Daniel sat down, running a hand through his sweat-soaked hair. We're gonna die if we stop moving, he corrected. Ortiz returned from the back. Clear. But this place has been hit before. Not much left. Ryan set down his rifle. So what now? Vaughn glanced at the barricaded entrance. The undead pressed against the metal, their fingers clawing at the gaps. We wait, she said. Daniel frowned. For what? Vaughn's eyes were hard. For the right time to leave this city. Silence filled the store, broken only by the relentless moaning outside. The city was falling. And soon, there wouldn't be anything left to fight for. The distant sound of sirens still echoed through the ruins of the city, a haunting reminder of a world that had already fallen apart. Daniel sat on the cold tile floor of the department store, gripping his rifle like a lifeline. Outside, the moans of the dead never stopped. The security gate rattled under the pressure of the Horde pressing against it. Their fingers clawed at the gaps, their rotting faces pressed close as if they could sense the warm flesh just beyond their reach. Marcus exhaled. This isn't gonna hold forever. No kidding, Vaughn muttered. She was already checking her shotgun, counting every last shell. Ortiz glanced toward the back of the store. We need to find another way out before this turns into a tomb. Ryan wiped sweat from his brow. I hate to ask, but what about Claire? Silence. Daniel felt a knot tighten in his stomach. They had left her behind, locked in the holding cells at the police station. She was alive when we left, he said finally. And we said we'd come back. Vaughn scoffed. Yeah? And how do you propose we do that, genius? Walk right through that? She gestured toward the mass of undead crushing against the gate. Ryan clenched his fists. I won't just abandon her. Daniel sighed. No one's saying that. But right now, we have to focus on surviving. A loud crash came from the rear of the store. Everyone froze. Vaughn was the first to raise her shotgun. Tell me that was just the wind. Ortiz shook his head. Not a chance. Another thud. Then, a low growl. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. We're not alone. Trapped between the living and the dead. The group moved cautiously, stepping over broken displays and shattered glass. The back of the department store was a wreck, storage boxes overturned, shelves looted. The only light came from a flickering exit sign above a metal door. Daniel signaled for silence, then pressed his ear against the door. Something moved on the other side. Slow, shuffling footsteps. A shadow passed beneath the doorframe. Then, a hand slammed against the glass window. Everyone jumped. Through the grime-covered window, Daniel saw them, not the dead, but the living. A group of people stood in the alley behind the store, eyes wild, faces gaunt. They weren't infected. Not yet. But they weren't friendly either. One of them, a man with a thick beard and a blood-stained jacket, pounded on the door. Hey! Open up! Vaughn immediately shook her head. Hell! No! Please! A woman's voice. They're coming. You gotta let us in. Daniel hesitated. Ryan stepped forward. We can't just leave them out there. Marcus grabbed his arm. You don't know who they are, man. They could be worse than the dead. Another crash, this time from the front of the store. The security gate bent inward. The undead were breaking through. Daniel's mind raced. Trapped between the dead on one side and desperate survivors on the other. Ortiz muttered, "We're out of options." The gate at the front let out a metallic screech. Vaughn cursed. "Screw it. Open the damn door." Daniel unlocked the back door just as the front gate finally gave way. The enemy within. The strangers rushed inside. A mix of 3 men and 2 women, all breathless, all filthy. Bearded Jacket caught his breath, eyes darting between them. "You have no idea how bad it's getting out there." Vaughn locked the door behind them. "We're well aware." The youngest of the group, a teenage boy, shook his head. "You don't understand. There's something else out there." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The woman who had begged for entry finally spoke. "The dead are changing." Silence fell over the group. Ryan blinked. "Changing, how?" Before she could answer, the first zombie reached the doorway. It wasn't like the others. It moved faster. It lunged. Vaughn fired. The blast tore through its chest, but it didn't go down. It staggered, snarling, then charged again. Daniel fired next, aiming for the head. Only then did it fall. The room was silent except for their heavy breathing. Bearded Jacket swallowed hard. "That's what I meant." Ryan took a step back. "No way. They don't move like that." "They do now," the woman whispered. "And they're only getting worse." Marcus clenched his jaw. "If they're getting faster, we're screwed." Ortiz looked toward the alley door. "And if they're already here, that means—" A thud against the back door cut him off. More moans. More thuds. "They followed us," Bearded Jacket whispered. "We led them right to you." Vaughn's grip tightened around her shotgun. "Then we'd better move. Now." Daniel took a shaky breath. There was no time to plan, no time to argue. Nowhere was safe anymore. Not from the dead. And not from what they were becoming. The department store was no longer a refuge. The front entrance was gone, torn open by the relentless undead. The back alley was compromised, fresh horrors clawing at the door. They were trapped, their only option now to fight their way out. Vaughn pumped her shotgun. "We move fast, we move smart, or we die. Clear?" No one argued. Daniel's heart pounded as he checked his rifle. Ryan swallowed hard, gripping his bat. Ortiz wiped sweat from his face, while Marcus clenched his crowbar like his life depended on it. The newcomers, the ones they had just saved, looked equally terrified. "We can't stay here," Bearded Jacket said. "We have a place, a real shelter." Vaughn cut him off. "Save the sales pitch. What's the fastest way out of this death trap?" The teenage boy, Jake, pointed to a loading dock door in the back. "That leads to the alleys. If we can get past those things, we can cut through the subway." Ortiz scoffed. "Subway? You want to go underground, where there's no light and nowhere to run?" Jake shrugged. "You got a better idea?" No one did. A loud crash snapped them back to reality, the front doors fully gave way, and they poured in. Dozens of them. The dead. The fast ones. Their grotesque bodies moved with disturbing speed, eyes glowing with some unnatural hunger. "Move!" Vaughn shouted. The run for the subway. They sprinted. Daniel nearly tripped over a fallen mannequin as he bolted for the loading dock. Ryan was right behind him, Ortiz covering the rear with Marcus. Vaughn kicked open the loading dock door, and the cold night air hit them like a slap. The alley was swarming. More infected. More of the fast ones. Jake's mother gasped. "They're everywhere." "Stick together," Vaughn ordered. "We fight our way through." The first zombie lunged. Daniel fired, hitting its skull clean through. Another came from the side, too fast. Ryan swung his bat, cracking it across the creature's jaw. It barely stumbled. Marcus drove his crowbar into its skull. This time, it dropped. More were coming. so many more. Ortiz spotted an opening down a side street. There! Go! They ran, weaving between rusted cars and piles of debris. The subway entrance was just ahead, a gaping stairwell leading into the dark. Vaughn didn't hesitate. She jumped onto the steps. Down! Now! One by one, they plunged into the underground. The moment Daniel's boots hit the platform, he realized their mistake. The subway wasn't empty. Into the darkness. The platform was littered with bodies, some long dead, others still twitching, rising. The moans echoed off the tiled walls. The dim emergency lighting flickered, casting everything in eerie shadows. Jake whimpered. This was a mistake. Vaughn ignored him. We find the tunnels. The city's lost, but if we move underground, we might still have a chance. Bearded Jacket looked panicked. No. No way. We can't. Daniel turned. You have a better option? The man hesitated, then shook his head. Then let's move. The group pressed forward, weapons raised, stepping carefully around the bodies. Every shadow felt alive, every sound a potential threat. The smell of decay was overwhelming. Then, Ryan froze. Guys? Daniel followed his gaze. At the far end of the platform, past the wrecked turnstiles, something moved. Not the dead. Not the fast ones. Something worse. A massive shape lurched into view, hunched, grotesque, something that had once been human but had become something else. Its skin was bloated, its body pulsing, its face an unrecognizable mess of fused flesh. Ryan took a step back. What the hell is that? The thing breathed. A slow, ragged inhale. Then, it turned toward them. And it charged. The monster awakens. The entire subway shook as the mutated beast crashed forward, moving with terrifying speed despite its size. Daniel barely had time to dive aside before it plowed through the turnstiles like they were paper. Vaughn fired first. The shotgun blasted into its flesh. The thing staggered, but didn't fall. Ortiz emptied his magazine. Ryan swung his bat. Nothing stopped it. It swung a grotesquely mutated arm, smashing a pile of seats into splinters. Jake's mother wasn't fast enough. The thing grabbed her. She screamed, kicking, thrashing. Then it ripped her in half. Blood splattered across the walls. Jake's scream was pure agony. Ryan yanked him back before the thing could grab him next. Vaughn grabbed Daniel's arm. We have to run. He didn't need to be told twice. The group bolted, leaping over corpses, dodging between the broken remains of the subway platform. The thing roared, shaking the entire tunnel. Daniel's lungs burned as he ran. They needed an exit. Fast. Then, Marcus shouted, "Train! There's a train!" Daniel turned. A derailed subway train sat half off the tracks, its doors hanging open. It was their only shot. Go! Vaughn yelled. The thing was right behind them. Ryan practically threw Jake inside. Marcus and Ortiz jumped in next. Vaughn shoved Daniel forward. The moment his boots hit the train car, he spun. And the monster lunged. Vaughn wasn't inside yet. Daniel grabbed her wrist and yanked her in just as the creature's massive clawed hand swiped at her. The doors slammed shut. The creature roared outside, slamming its massive body against the train. The entire car shook. Daniel gasped for breath. They were alive. For now. Vaughn leaned back against the wall, chest heaving. She locked eyes with Daniel. We need to get the hell out of the city. No one disagreed. But deep down, Daniel knew the city wasn't going to let them go without a fight. The subway train shook violently as the mutated beast outside slammed its grotesque body against the metal shell. Each impact sent tremors through the derailed car, rattling the broken seats and flickering overhead lights. Daniel wiped the blood from his face, his mind racing. The others were gasping for breath, the weight of their situation finally settling in. Ryan clutched Jake, who was still sobbing over his mother's brutal death. Vaughn reloaded her shotgun with shaking hands. Marcus and Ortiz stared at the denting doors, their weapons gripped tight. Bearded Jacket muttered, "We're dead. We're dead, we're dead, we're..." Vaughn punched him, cutting off his panicked rambling. "Not if we fight." Daniel gritted his teeth. "That thing isn't stopping. We need to move. Now." Ortiz pointed to the other end of the train. "There's a way out. The back of the train leads to the tunnels." Daniel didn't need to be told twice. "Go. Now." The group scrambled through the narrow aisle, stepping over debris, bodies, and broken glass. The mutant outside roared, its bloated fists pounding against the train, denting the steel like cardboard. As they reached the last car, the tunnel stretched ahead of them, dark, damp, endless. Marcus swallowed. "I hate this plan." "No other choice," Vaughn said. Daniel stepped forward, rifle raised, then froze. In the darkness ahead, glowing red eyes flickered to life. "Oh, come on," Ryan groaned. The tunnel wasn't empty. The fast ones were here. Dozens of them. And they were already charging. The fight for freedom. Daniel fired first, his rifle cracking through the silence. The first infected dropped, but the rest didn't slow down. Vaughn fired her shotgun, the blast ripping through two at once. Marcus swung his crowbar, caving in a skull before kicking another back. Jake screamed as one lunged at him. Ryan shoved him aside and smashed his bat into its head. Blood sprayed the walls. Ortiz cursed as one tackled him. Daniel turned and fired point blank, blowing its brains out. More kept coming. And behind them, the mutant was still smashing the train, getting closer. "We're boxed in," Marcus yelled. Daniel's mind raced. If they stayed, they'd be ripped apart from both sides. Then he saw it, an emergency service ladder leading up to a maintenance exit. "There! The ladder! Move!" One by one, they scrambled for it. Ryan shoved Jake up first, followed by Ortiz and Marcus. Vaughn covered them, emptying her last rounds into the Horde. The train behind them screeched and collapsed as the mutant finally tore through the metal. Daniel fired one last shot and climbed. Vaughn followed, just as the mutant lunged. She barely made it. The thing's massive clawed hand slammed into the ladder's base, twisting the metal. But they were already too high. With one last roar, the beast fell back, its monstrous form disappearing beneath a wave of writhing, screeching undead. And then, Daniel reached the top. Escape from the city. He shoved open the maintenance hatch, and cold night air flooded his lungs. They were outside. The city skyline stretched before them, bathed in moonlight. Fires burned in the distance. The streets were crawling with the dead. But ahead, beyond the ruined buildings, was the bridge. The only way out. Ryan gasped. "It's still standing." Vaughn nodded. "Then we run." No one argued. They sprinted through the alleys, dodging abandoned cars, leaping over rubble. Every step was a race against death. The closer they got, the clearer the bridge became, lined with wrecked military vehicles. And something else. A helicopter. Marcus gasped. "Is that?" Daniel's heart pounded. A group of survivors were loading onto the chopper, soldiers covering them. A chance. A real chance. "Go! Go!" They ran harder than ever, lungs burning, the growls of the undead growing louder. They hit the bridge just as the chopper began lifting off. Vaughn fired into the air. "Wait!" The pilot hesitated. The soldiers waved frantically. "Run! Move your asses!" The undead poured onto the bridge. The mutant was back. It had climbed from the tunnels, its monstrous body lurching onto the asphalt. And it was coming straight for them. The final moment. Daniel reached the chopper first, grabbing Jake and throwing him inside. Ortiz and Marcus jumped in next. Ryan tripped. Daniel caught his arm. The mutant lunged. And Vaughn shoved them both forward. The monster's claws ripped into her side. Daniel screamed. Vaughn's face twisted in pain, but she still turned her shotgun up. She fired. The monster's head exploded. But Vaughn was already falling. Daniel reached for her. She shook her head. Get out. Then the dead swarmed her. Daniel screamed as the helicopter rose into the sky. The city shrank below them. The undead still raged. Vaughn was gone. But they were alive. And as the helicopter disappeared into the night, Daniel knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not yet. End of Part 8.